When were you a part of a team that oozed, I don't have a better word than that oozed strategic purpose? When were you a part of a team that oozed strategic purpose? And what was that like for you? I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the Wild Conversation, everyone, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. And today we're continuing our series. This is an amazing series on building whole leader continuity and specifically strategic purpose for your team. If you don't know WILD, if you don't know what this stands for, WILD stands for whole and intentional leader development. It's not mild, so it's not mediocre and intentional leader development. It's not piled, so it's not piecemeal or partial intentional leader development. It is whole and intentional leader development. And I want to, and purpose and strategy are key parts of this whole picture of what it means to develop our leader capacity. And I want to say one thing right out of the gate, that purpose and strategy are not enemies. Purpose and strategy are not enemies. In fact, I would suggest that at their best, they are great neighbors who borrow all kinds of things from each other all the time, not just eggs and milk. Do we do that anymore? My neighbors actually do. I've had a neighbor come by and actually ask for an egg, believe it or not. So it does happen when you don't want to go to the store and you need an egg for some cookies or something. But it's something that they're not enemies. And that's just, and so I want to invite you into this question. What would change if the work that you're doing today and the team that you are a part of literally oozed with, I'm sorry, I don't have a better word, ooze with strategic purpose? What would change? Where every person understood and understands why they're doing their work, was aligned with where their business or their organization was going and the people that you're serving, where we were strategic and intentional and making moves that took us forward, help the business achieve its financial goals and mission, while also helping every individual discern and interpret their own purpose in a strategic way. I know that's a mouthful, but like, I'm just trying to say, like, what is that like if we could be a part of an organization where that was occurring, where not only we knew where we were going as an organization, but every person was discerning where they're going in relationship to that in a strategic way? What is that like? Is it possible? Is it even reasonable for us to imagine such a place? Like, I hope some of you realize my question, right? Because in some cases we work in places where we're like, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible now. A friend and I used to have this conversation, and it's kind of a ridiculous conversation, but I kind of like it. So we would ask leaders this question: if you could only focus on one thing, what would you focus on? You only get to pick one: strategy, leadership, culture, execution, or purpose. Okay, if you can only focus on one thing, and those of you that want to go, I want all of them. If we would force the question, you only get to pick one in this weird world we just created: strategy, leadership, culture, execution, or purpose. I think it's interesting, right? Because what we wanted, the point in asking the question was not to force an individual answer, but to force this reality that they're different things, but they're related and that they're all necessary. And so let me define these things. And this is, I know today's about strategic purpose, but I want to just take you to this high level for just a moment at an organizational level, because I want to add one thing to that list as well, which I'll add in just a moment. So I want to add the word mission in these choices. I want to talk about mission, strategy, culture, purpose, execution, and leadership. Mission, strategy, culture, purpose, execution, and leadership. And there's certainly more some of you might add to the list, but what is the mission? That is our purposeful goal. What is the mission that we're on? And what I'm suggesting to you is that one of our jobs as leaders, I don't care whether you lead a team of 2, or actually you're just getting started by yourself, or you're leading an organization of 100,000. I really don't care. These are things that would be important for us to consider. Mission. What is the mission that we are on? What is our purposeful goal? That's that mission part. And I'll tell you that the mission for, if you ask members of the WILD Leaders team, they will say, our mission is to prepare a generation of courageous and sacrificial leaders. And the mission statement is actually longer than that, but that's the fundamental core: to prepare a generation of courageous, sacrificial leaders. The second word was strategy. Strategy is, how are we going to achieve the mission? That strategy that's designed around what we are uniquely qualified to do. You got me? It's strategy is the how. How are we going to achieve the mission? And that is uniquely designed around what we are uniquely qualified to do. So I actually had this conversation with a couple members of our team this morning, and what they said was this: it's through the wild. For us, this is through the Wild Toolkit. So some of you think that Fridays, our conversations that we create on Fridays, is what Wild does. That's all we do. But fundamentally, what we do all the time is providing a system for whole leader development that is quite literally focused. We talk about it as focused on the one, where we're focused on individual development, because we believe if we're going to change culture, if we're going to change things in our organizations, we have to start with us. So the toolkit is focused that way. Now, the word culture. So we got mission, strategy, and culture. The culture is the shared values and assumptions that define what it's like to be here. And in our case, for Wild, some of you have seen this. We have a charter that we can actually send you a link to that says, like, what are we aspiring to be together? And our charter is not something we put on the wall, but it's a living and breathing document of what we aspire to be together, that some of you have seen. Our purpose. Okay, so we got mission, strategy, culture, purpose. Our reason for doing it. Why? Our purpose. For their sake and for ours. When I say their, I mean other people's. The why. And for us, one of the things that we talk about at Wild, I'm just sharing you ours so you could think about your own, is that every major movement of change in our world requires two things: a deep need and a leader. And so rarely do we actually talk about leaders. We talk about the needs all the time, but who's talking about preparing the leaders who will actually go first to make the change? And so for us, that's for Wild. That's our deeper why is if we don't do this, where do we end up? So our investment in leaders is deeply rooted in our why. And then execution is the other one. This is self-explanatory, right? And I wrote down, let's go get it done. Like, how do we go get it done? Let's execute on these things. And then leadership, the final one, the people who will go first in aligning mission, strategy, culture, and purpose to motivate execution. So in other words, what I'm suggesting to you is that one of our jobs as leaders is to define these things. And we work with so many organizations who are actually succeeding in a business sense. You know what I mean? Like they're profitable, they're growing, but so many of them, and that's both nonprofits and businesses, have not answered some of these questions about what are these things: mission, strategy, culture, purpose, execution, and leadership. And so it's interesting. I think these things matter. As I know the people who are in this Wild community, is like, some of you run a very small organization. I think it's still important to begin there. That's part of the leadership job. And so here's what's kind of interesting. The reason why I bring those things up, why is this important, is that people can't discern their fit if they don't know what they're fitting into. You hear what I'm saying? Like it's like people can't discern their own story in relationship to their role in the organization if they don't know what they're fitting into. And if those of you who would say, like, Rob, I don't have a document like you have, that's okay. I don't want to shame anyone into document shame. I don't want to do that. But I hope I inspire you to think about, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could generate a simple statement. And let's just think about this. Like, this is my very pithy levels of strategic purpose for an individual in an organization, or lack thereof. Okay. These are my quick and pithy levels. Number one, clock in and clock out. All right. Level one, do the task. Purpose is implied. You know, most of us, there's a reason, like get a paycheck. Like my sons, when they're going after these early jobs, they're like, how much does it pay an hour? That's their first question. You know, it's like the first question. And they'll learn that that's not the most important question, but that's their first question. You know, level two, business strategy. How we do things is clear. Here's how we do things. Let me teach you the processes. So it's beyond just clock in and clock out. Now I'm getting a sense for how we do things here. All right, that's level two. Number three, purpose is clear, but may lack strategy. So, and I would tell you honestly that for many nonprofits that we get a chance to serve, one of the first things that they're challenged to do is to identify their strategy, because their purpose, their reason for being is pretty clear, but that's still level three. Level four is that purpose and strategy are clear for the business. All right. So the reason we're here for the organization, that purpose is clear. and that the strategy for how we're going to go about achieving that purpose and that mission is clear, but it has not gone to a level 5. And level 5 would be this: that strategy and purpose for the organization and for each team and for each individual is clear. That's what I think I'm trying to invite us into today, is this possibility that we could actually have that level of alignment and clarity. And so as you get into this, it's one of the necessary steps in building leader continuity is a process of knowing our people and inviting them into knowing themselves better along the way. And that's why I come back to that initial question: is imagine if every person was evaluating this for themselves, and you were evaluating this with them. And it's so interesting to think about this, because I actually had this, I did this post a couple of weeks ago, and it was all about, it was this. It's called the top 10 interview questions we should be asking. And it was a risk, I'll tell you, because as an industrial organizational psychologist, I thought the risk was going to be that people would be like, because in IO psychology, there's selection processes are very, very, you have to be very careful, especially in large organizations. And so making sure that those processes are valid. So I thought that was going to be the problem with this posting. But what it was more about was something I didn't actually see. And I asked some of these questions that I would hope we would ask. And I asked them in the spirit, when we were interviewing people, that we would actually be inviting people into the possibility, even in an interview, that they could see themselves better. So it wasn't even for the sake of just evaluating. It wasn't interviewing as evaluation, which is part of it, but it was interviewing as a process of alignment and discernment. You hear what I'm saying? So like every one of these questions, the spirit that I had behind it, that I should have seen that other people might see it differently, was inviting someone into this reality that we're going to care about these things here. So here's just a couple of the questions. What character virtue in you is a strength, and if overdone becomes problematic for others? Because I would love to be asked that. Like, it'd be amazing, to be asked that question. Another question I asked was this: knowing yourself in past jobs. I just feel like everyone should be asked this question. Knowing yourself in past jobs, what resources and support will you need to be successful? Here's the thing: is some of you are thinking, as you hear that question, you're thinking like, I don't even know I don't know how I would answer that. What I'm hoping to invite you into is that that's an important question. I want every one of you to know, what do you need to be successful in this role? And I think the organization should be interested in your answer and interested in figuring out whether they actually can provide it for you. And so what I bring these things up because of this process of us understanding ourselves better and understanding our own purpose and strategy is a part of the formula. And so I think this is the if this makes sense to you now, what I'm suggesting is this: is that as leaders, if we could get clear about some of those things regarding culture and strategy and leadership and execution and our purpose and reason, imagine the richness of the conversation it creates for every person in the organization when they begin to discern those things for themselves. And so if you're with me, think about that now, because we're working together. We're trying to discern these things together. So the organization gets clear, and now we invite a person into an intentional process of discerning this for themselves. And so I want to read you something there's one assessment in the Wild Toolkit called the Purposeful Goals Assessment. And it's a little bit of a bait and switch in terms of its name, because when you hear goals, most of us, like, goals is the overwhelming word, right? Because we know a lot about goals. We know that goals matter. We know that I'm hoping sometime that, Megan will see if our friend, why is his name not with me right now? Our goal setting friend, if he could come and talk to us about everything regarding goal setting. Okay, it's going to come to me in just a minute. I'm having one of those moments. And so Gary Latham. So Gary, if you hear this, I deeply apologize. It happens to everybody, so you're not the first person I've ever forgotten. But Gary did this amazing research on goal setting. So he did the research behind SMART goals. And so the goal setting part of this, the purposeful goals assessment, the little switch in this is that it's about goal setting, but it's more deeply about purpose. Okay? So it's more deeply about purpose, because what it does is it has you think about, what is the purpose behind different areas of my life, my role in different areas of my life. And imagine what a conversation looks like regarding Rob's purpose for his work, for his finances, for his health, for his faith, for his family, and just for his personal development. If I'm having a conversation beginning to discern and think about within the context of my work, the purpose, the why behind each of those areas of my life, and I'm beginning to understand better the purpose and strategy behind my organization, imagine what begins to happen for a person when that level of discernment is occurring. And if some of you are saying like, that sounds like a lot to do, Rob, I'm telling you, this is precisely why I spent my entire adult life in the process of building a structure for that. I'm just telling like that because yes, without a system for that, it's a journal. And I'm not slamming journals because at least it's a first step, but without a structure for that. So let me read you something from this particular tool. It opens with this: goal setting is especially effective when goals are achievable, specific, and measurable. If that's the case, then why do so many of us still struggle with setting and achieving goals? Much of the answer may not be about our goals, but about the overarching purposes in different areas of our lives. These purposes behind our actions or motivations are the keys to unlocking purposeful goal setting and achievement. While lots of people set goals, many fail to identify a guiding purpose, and others lack the ability to strategically accomplish them. Like the how do I get those things done? And then it went on. There's some questions that it asks you. This is before your story enters into this tool, like your narrative regarding your purposes. Listen to it. Some of these questions are provoking for me. And the first one is this: to what extent is your goal setting being driven by an overarching purpose or purposes that are specific to different areas of your life and work? Number two, what is that telling you about how and why you set goals? Number three, do you know why you are setting goals and for what purpose? Number four, how do you strategically get things done? And number five, are you setting performance goals measured by achievement and the result, and learning goals, doing both, measured by personal learning? And so the reason why I bring this up is precisely that: is once the organization has gotten clear about where we're going and why, and the strategy behind what it is we do, then when a person begins to have this conversation regarding their own purpose, because without that first part, this process becomes all about me without any conceptualization of what it means to build leader continuity across my organization. But if that first part of the work is done, now this conversation, as I'm discerning, like, Rob, what is the purpose of your work, is constantly being aligned with what the purpose of the organization looks like. And I want to say one other thing about this is that, and I've mentioned this in previous weeks in this particular series. For whatever reason, in our design, life requires maintenance. Life requires, there's just very few things, whether it's your teeth. Yes, I did go to the dentist recently. Whether it's your health, or whether it's discerning purpose and that alignment, and even the strategy through which you're going to get things done, that how you're going to achieve that purpose requires maintenance. And so this is why this particular tool in this conversation is something that should not be hung on a wall, but should be a continual conversation of where am I going and why? And how does my whole perspective, my whole life come and intersect with where my organization is going? Because as I'm even interacting with members of our team, take Megan and Claire for examples, is like understanding where they're going and why in different areas of their life and the seasons that they're in, and how that's working alongside where Wild is going and why, and our strategy is a continual process of maintenance and discernment that just takes our work to our execution to a whole nother level. So let's get talking. Let's just keep the conversation going.